Ocala, Gainesville, The Villages, 1370 AM, 96.3 FM, The Source.
All right, 25 minutes before 10 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in. I've never been a lady, Robin.
No, thank goodness. You'd be disappointing a lot of people.
And I don't know what you ladies go through as far as friendships with each other goes. But I do know it seems to be like considerably different than what us guys go through, right? And I guess the window for the world to see how the other half lives, whether the other half is the other gender or richer people or poorer people or other countries, is movies. I think when I watch a movie that's considered a chick flick or something, which I happen to be a fan of those things, when there's like a ladies' night out kind of a movie, I think, oh, wow, so that's kind of how it is for you, huh?
Yes.
And then I just get back into my old normal routine and go, okay, well, it's good. I Know How You Feel is a book written by Diane Barth, Diane Barth. F is her first initial. The joy and heartbreak of friendship in women's lives. And, I know one of the, gosh, I hate to say this almost, but one of the ladies who used to work here, Patsy, recently passed away, and you and Patsy were really good friends.
Yeah.
So it was kind of hard for you as much as it was for the rest of us. But
it's hard.
I think you were maybe her closest female friend in the radio station. Dr. F. Diane Barth. Good morning, Doctor. Thank you for being on the show with us today.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. I also just would like to say I'm not a doctor, so just call me Diane.
Okay.
I'll just get the doctor off my list here. Well, thank you for
exactly.
Thank you for being on the air with us today.
Thank you for having me.
So your book is getting some nice reviews. That must be rewarding for you.
It's wonderful. It's very nice.
So how do you feel?
And I actually was just going to say that you put your finger right on one of the main things about the book. And one of the things that was so much fun about writing it is that I don't think I've ever heard a man say, I know how you feel. But women say it to each other all the time. It's a way that we have of connecting that is sort of attuned and empathic. It is sometimes irritating because sometimes we feel like the other person doesn't know how we feel. So it's not always a perfect response, but the sense that you can talk to somebody who does get how you're feeling is what I heard over and over and over again from women who talk to me. And Robin, I'm sorry about your loss. I talked to many, many women who shared stories about losing a friend and the pain of that. I have a whole chapter about a hole in your heart because the loss really feels like it's a part of yourself that's
it does
gone.
Very much so. Yeah. Thank you.
So do the things that push the buttons on a woman, are they the same things that would push a button on a man? For example, one of the questions that was provided to us was to ask you about you're at dinner or whatever, and your husband is flirting with the waitress, that kind of thing.
You wouldn't dare.
The way the woman feels when he's doing that, is that different than the way a man would feel if she was doing the same thing to a male waiter?
That is really interesting. I would imagine there would be similarities and there would be differences. And the thing that I look at and that I think about is that women friends would respond to it differently than men friends would, I would think.
Oh,
so
really?
a man might get really possessive, and he might tell his buddy that his wife was flirting with the waiter, and the buddy would say, what would the buddy say? I don't know, Larry, what would the buddy say?
What would he say? He would say, well...
You're the wingman. What would you say?
Let me go talk to him. Because we're going to blame the guy.
Okay.
We're going to blame the guy right away.
Okay, so you would take action, right? I mean, that's sort of like the immediate response is, all right, I'm going to go beat him up.
No.
Right?
Yeah, well, that
not,
might be what the words are, but the actual thing would be just talking. I think a normal guy would go up to the guy and say, "Hey, could you lay off a little bit?"
Yeah. Okay, or not, or maybe not even say anything. But it's a way. That's a guy way of showing support. A woman would probably say, "Oh, you must have been really upset about that," or "It must have really hurt your feelings." I mean, we sort of go for the feeling part before we go to the other stuff. I was actually on a show yesterday with Deborah Tannen, who's a linguist who talks about differences in the ways that men and women talk.
Uh-huh.
And she said that years ago when she wrote the book, You Don't Understand, about the differences between men and women, she said that she thought that men went for action and women went for talking about feelings. But that she believes now that women go for solutions also. It's just that we go more slowly towards solutions, and we talk about feelings along the way. And that's really, I think, the crux of the matter here, is that over and over again in I Know How You Feel, women were talking to me about how they sought out one another for empathy, for understanding, for activities too, and for doing things together too. That was really important.
Does it help?
Go ahead.
Does it help a man to know these things? Because maybe we are falling short. I mean, we want our girlfriends and our wives to feel happy with us too. So maybe if we realize, oh my gosh, I shouldn't flirt with the waitress, and I never realized it was that big of a deal, maybe we'll stop doing that stuff. Or maybe if she likes going out and you're a homebody and you realize, they say, oh my gosh, we should go out more. I'm just sorry, I just never thought of it, right?
Oh, yeah, sure. I mean, I think that is one of the things that any guy, and actually any couple, can get from the book, is thinking about the differences between them and how they might consider sort of compromising and doing things a little more the way one person likes it, a little more the way the other person likes it.
Do you know one thing
I actually... Yeah.
I'm sorry. I was just going to say one thing I've noticed a difference in, and just I'd love to hear your feedback on this, is that women seem to understand what it's like to be a mother before they are a mother. But a man doesn't really know what it's like to be a father until he is a father. Does that make sense?
That's interesting. The book is really not about differences between men and women. It's really about this particular dynamic in women's lives. So I didn't do any interviews about that, but it seems like what you're saying makes sense to me. I think a lot of women prepare to be mothers from the time they're very young. Although I will say, as a therapist, I have talked to plenty of women who have no idea what it's going to be like and are totally taken by surprise.
So,
yeah.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Larry has pointed out to me that he's observed that everybody's life has different chapters. And that is true for the women who have friendships with other women, because all of a sudden you've got these friendships, and then maybe one woman has a baby, and then she has time for this baby and not enough time for the girlfriends anymore, and maybe another woman in the group might decide to move away and things. How do you hold a friendship together when there are these differences that pull you apart?
Those are really, really important struggles that women have. And one of the things I heard over and over again as I was interviewing women was the changes in our lives from the time that we leave college and leave behind really close friends in college, through exactly what you were saying, Robin, the time that we're dealing with women who are when we start having children, or we get married and our friends haven't gotten married yet and we're not as available as we used to be, up even to when we start working, when our career takes off, if that's what happens, and we're not available for our friends in the same way anymore, to when we start to retire and friends move away, or we move into a retirement community. In every case, there are different needs, there are different dynamics, but one of the things I heard in every realm of women's existence is that if you that you can stay in touch with friends, and you don't have to be completely accessible every single minute. You don't have to keep the same kind of contact that you had when you were in college or in middle school. And you also can look for new friends who are friends, maybe activity friends, maybe friends who are not, you don't share your deepest secrets with, but you walk with them, or you go with them to concerts, or you're in a book group with them. That actually, one of the things I kept hearing was that there are a lot of different ways that women have of being friends and making friends, and that's sort of hard for us to keep in mind sometimes.
The book is called I Know How You Feel. Diane Barth is our guest, and she wrote the book. I've often been kind of warned about telling people that I know how they feel, because I don't know how they feel. And people always say that, and usually it's because I'm not them, maybe because I was raised in the North and now I live in the South. Sometimes that's an issue, or I'm white and the person I'm talking to is black, and maybe that's part of it. Or a male and a female, I know how you feel. No, you don't know how I feel. Or if somebody lost a child, God forbid, I know how you feel. No, you don't know how I feel.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, I think men do say that, or at least they think it, or, No,
you're right, and that is one of the things that I think that you're probably right. I don't know, but that I think men get criticized for when they try to say that they know how a woman feels, because but the truth is that women don't always know how each other feel either, and women don't always know how guys feel. And in fact, in my family, I was criticized by my son at one point because I would say, I understand how you feel. And he told me, if you understand how I feel, it means to me that you think what I'm feeling is okay. And I'm telling you that I'm feeling, guilty or upset or anxious.
Oh, interesting, yeah.
And so it had a whole different meaning for him than it did for me.
How do you handle jealousy? Because sometimes there's jealousy among women. One woman feels like they're not accomplishing as much as the friend. And then there's also the jealousy of the spouse if a woman wants to spend time away from the spouse.
Yes. One of the wonderful things that I learned as I was interviewing women for I Know How You Feel is that actually these are real serious problems, and there are many different ways of handling them. Sometimes it's just enough to say to your friend, I love you, and it's okay that you have these feelings. Or to your spouse, I love you. I just need to also have time with my friends. Actually, on the spouse thing, somebody told me that he thought his wife's friends saved their marriage because she would come to him and she would want to chat about something that she told him about, the day before and the day before or the week before, and he didn't have the patience to listen. But she and her friends could talk about it for days and hours and weeks and not get frustrated with each other about going over some of the same things. So I think it's important for spouses to know that friends don't take us away from our spouses, but they can enrich the relationship. And I think the same thing with friends who are jealous or envious of something that we're doing, or competitive, or when we're feeling competitive with a friend. It is true that competition and envy are forms of admiration. And if we can make space in a relationship to have the negative feelings, then we can also put in the positive. So we can say, I'm really jealous of you because I think it's just wonderful and I wish I had it too.
Yeah, that is the difference between men and women. Mm-hmm. I'm jealous of you, and I hate you is more like a man. I can't believe you're writing that book and you're so successful at it.
Larry, going back to your difference between men and women, one of the things that I did hear from a number of women, but one woman in particular said that she was a professional, and she said that her friends were all men because she's in a very competitive profession. And she found that men were much more comfortable and direct being competitive, and that women, she said, would be indirect. They would take things personally. They felt they would secretly hate you and act like they loved you.
Interesting.
And she said she just couldn't put up with that.
But we had a guy on yesterday, and he gave us an example. He was trying to talk about leadership, and he said he gave a group of guys raw spaghetti, dry, hard spaghetti, and marshmallows, and told them to build a tower. And he gave a group of women, several groups of men and several groups of women, and the women inevitably built taller towers that standed longer with marshmallows and spaghetti.
Really?
And his conclusion was that the women kind of allowed each other to be leaders, whereas the men all wanted to be the leader. And that was the difference,
That's interesting.
How do you make a woman see that she has a woman friend who dominates? I know somebody that has a woman friend, and the friend is an attorney, and she has this other woman picking up her children from school, taking them to dinner, and all of this. But the second woman has a job, but as soon as the woman leaves the job, she's like the caregiver for these children. And then if she makes plans to go somewhere to do something, then this other woman manipulates her to say, oh, no, you can't do that with your work people. I've got this thing going on at my place. How do you get that other woman to see that she's being used?
Wow. And she doesn't feel like she's being used?
No, not at all.
Wow.
She doesn't see it.
So there's actually a triangle going on, because you're feeling protective of her.
Right.
She's not feeling at all misused.
Exactly.
And the other woman is completely stepping over her boundaries.
Right. That's what I think. My opinion.
Yeah. So I think that it's interesting that she's not. It doesn't bother her. So first of all, you as the third point on the triangle have to figure out how you understand that, because maybe she gets something important out of it. But also, then I think that you can think about and talk with her about boundaries, because I have a chapter on boundaries, and I know how you feel, because I think women often have trouble setting boundaries. We like to feel like we're being nice, and we like to feel like we're being a caregiver and useful, exactly. And so sometimes we don't set boundaries that really protect us, and also ultimately protect the relationship. Because at some point, this woman's going to get frustrated and say, I've had enough, and that'll be the end of the relationship.
Yeah, because she doesn't have a significant other in her life. She doesn't have any children. She's in her late 30s, and she's, it just boggles my mind. She doesn't really have a life outside of this woman and her 2 children.
Yeah. So that may be the answer to the question of what does she get out of it. It may make her feel like she's got a family or a life. But and that's a real struggle, because if you set boundaries, it means you have to find something else that is fulfilling, and maybe that's hard for her.
Yeah, good perspective. Thank you.
The book is called, that was interesting to listen to. I Know How You Feel is the title of the book. F. Diane Barth is the author and our guest. I wanted to, I know you spoke to a lot of women in order to write this book. Can you give us, maybe tell us about one of the women and what she told you?
Well, I tell a lot of the stories in the book, and there's so many different women. It's hard to pick out anybody in particular. But I'll tell you the story of Daphne, who was a woman who was who actually, her best friend and her husband both betrayed her because she came home one day and found them in bed together. And she had to deal with this double betrayal and also still be a mom to her kids and maintain her job. And one of the things that she told me was, and we follow her through the book because a number of different things went on in her life, but one of the things that she told me was that she was, it was a really painful learning lesson, that at first she just decided that she didn't trust anybody, and she decided to turn in on herself and be just there with her children and just do her work, because if these 2 people could betray her, then anybody could betray her. But over time, she figured out ways to both come to grips with that and, in fact, directly address both of them, and also move on and find other sorry, other very fulfilling relationships.
Wow, that's a hard one to have to deal with.
Yeah.
You could see right away. In a way, I'm almost saying I know how she feels. Not that I know,
right.
Not that I really know. I've never been in that circumstance, but you sort of can. And
exactly, Larry. That's exactly right. That's why the words are less important than the fact that you're empathizing with what she's feeling.
Yeah, and you sort of can. And the one thing that I worry about, like, okay, let me put myself in the father position and not in the husband or boyfriend or friend position. But if I was her father, I would say to her, oh my gosh, now you're going to have a hard time trusting the world. And while the world is not trustworthy, there's somebody out there who is, even though you maybe thought you had one and didn't. And what about now I'm asking you what kind of advice you would give her. But I think as far as so is it important for the person who's making the statement that the title states, I know how you feel, is it important to say that, or to see? We're always told, just listen, just pay attention, just listen. You don't have to have a fix. You don't have to have advice.
Yeah.
Right.
But sometimes advice is important. So yes, there's something called active listening, and that is sort of what the "I know how you feel" is a metaphor for. It's like when you're listening to somebody, you go, mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, right. You're really communicating that you're paying attention and that you're feeling something. You're not necessarily feeling what they're feeling, but you're feeling something for them. But again, I have a whole chapter about, do friends give advice to friends? And one of the things that I loved, again, is that I got so many different answers. And I think the ultimate answer is that it depends on who you are. It depends on who the other person is. It depends on the situation. There are times that we give advice even when it's not wanted. And actually, one of the stories is there was a woman whose best friend, the two of them had been friends since they were young mothers, and they were now in their 60s. And the best friend had started to go deaf. And she was really getting crotchety and difficult to be around, and everybody was irritated with her. And her friend finally said to her, you know what? You need to get a hearing aid. Well, she had been fighting getting a hearing aid. She'd been fighting admitting she was going deaf because she didn't want to admit that she was getting older. She didn't want to admit she had this, physical damage, and she was vain. She didn't want to have a hearing aid showing on her ear. And she stopped talking to her friend for weeks. And then about 3 or 4 weeks later, she called the woman and she said, okay, you were completely right. I've got a hearing aid. Thank you very much. and they continued their friendship. But so sometimes you give advice even though it's not wanted, and sometimes you don't give advice and you just listen. And you have to know yourself, and you have to know who you're dealing with.
How do you yourself keep your objectivity when you are helping individuals and couples? You've been doing this for decades, and sometimes your emotions must come into play.
Yeah, it's one of the benefits of having been doing this for decades is that I have like two soundtracks going on in my head almost all the time. So I feel my feelings, and I can identify with what somebody's doing, or think they're crazy for doing what they're doing. And then my other soundtrack is, and why are they doing this? And how do you understand that? What do you think that's doing for them? And what's it doing why is it stirring up this feeling in you? And so I've learned to be able to use my reactions to understand something about what's going on with them.
Gosh.
I have a copy of the book. It's called I Know How You Feel. If you would like the copy that was sent to me, you can have it. I will leave it here at the station. You can come pick it up. The rest of us have to go buy it. I did find it on Amazon. You're getting really good reviews. The only other thing I guess we want to know is, do you have a website?
Yes, it's DianeBarth.net.
Easy enough. DianeBarth.net. Diane, that was a very fascinating conversation to not only participate in, but to listen between you and Robin. So I think I kind of know how you feel now, Robin.
Oh! Good. You can take me to lunch and we'll expand on it.
There you go. We got a big burger.
And I want to come too.
That's right.
You're welcome. You're in New York, right?
Yeah, it's a little bit long way to come for lunch, but I would love to come down.
I would love to.
It was a great conversation for me too. You all asked really, really great questions, and I have to think more about what you were talking about, Larry.
Well, here's the answer to the question: what the guy says when he goes to the waiter. He says, "I'll be right back. I'll talk to him." And then he goes to the waiter. He says, "Can you bring some more ketchup to the table, please?" Yeah, there you go. Thank you, Diane. Thank you for being on the show with us. That was fun.
Thank you very much. Fun for me too.
All right, we will be right back.
If you or a loved one is suffering with knee, shoulder, neck, back pain, or tennis elbow and would like to learn how to get out of pain, go to regenetic.com.